All righty, welcome back to the Bronx Buzz. I am thrilled about this segment, and I'll tell you why, because I am thrilled about this book. This is the third edition of South Bronx Rising, and it is just incredibly well done. As you can see, it is a scholarly work, and so it is my pleasure to welcome the author, Jill Jones. Nice to have you with us, Jill.
Thanks. Glad to be
Um,
here.
Jill, just a little background about you. You know, when you and I talked prior to the program, you told I just assumed you were like a lifelong Bronxite like me, and we're like, oh, somebody's got to document what's been going on. But that's not really the case with you, is it?
No, so I grew up overseas, and I first came to the Bronx when I was a graduate student at Columbia Journalism School in 1977, a long time ago. And we did an entire semester just trying to learn what was going on in the Bronx. And that was everything from meeting Raymond Rueda and people who were squatting, but also involved in a lot of constructive activities, all the way up to people at City Hall and the Ford Foundation. And the Bronx was in really bad shape in those days. The fires were moving along. And then I went on, I was working as a journalist at the Bergen Record. And then I came back to New York and started freelancing and began doing a lot of real estate coverage. And it was a story about the rehabilitation of Roosevelt Gardens on the Grand Concourse that got me back in the Bronx.
And
And
so you were inspired by. I'll tell you what always inspires me. You also mentioned A Decade of Fire, the wonderful film that documents that era. Um, that people said, okay, they're not going to do it. We're going to do it ourselves. And so, certainly, at that time, the story was the people of the Bronx taking control of their own communities, unlike many other places in the world. So, why don't you articulate for us the three editions and how we arrived at the third edition,
third edition.
which is here now? So, what years did numero uno and numero dos cover? And then let's bring it up to the present.
Yeah. So the first book starts with the Indians and Jonnes Bronx. So back, and as you see, it had a
Even
different
before
title.
1977.
It came out in 1986.
Right.
And at the end of that book, so it tells the whole story of, the whole history of the Bronx, but with the bulk of the focus, like half of the book, really looking at what had happened, in the last sort of previous decades. And it
Right.
ends with Ed Logue standing in front of the first Charlotte Street houses with the white picket fences,
Right.
which was his huge accomplishment. Because contrary to all the sort of urban know-it-alls who said no one in their right mind would want to come and buy a house
Right.
and live in the Bronx,
Right.
many people wanted
I'm
to do
right with
that.
you. I'm right with you here.
So that was the end of what turned out to be the first edition. Who knew? So quite a few years later, around 2000, someone from Fordham University got in touch with me and said, it'd be great if you came back and updated this because the Bronx has all been
We're,
rebuilt.
we're, we're still alive and things are going on. Yeah, yeah. So then you did the second edition.
That was the second edition. Brought you, and it's just further chapters. Um, and I do have to say, when I came back to the Bronx, oh my God, it was because I had moved to Baltimore. I had not set foot in the Bronx in 14 years. It was so moving to see what had happened. And honestly,
Because of what you had seen.
right, when I
Yeah,
left, the
wow.
place was not rebuilt.
Right.
I mean, it was being rebuilt, and the groups that would rebuild it were there. They're very much in my book. I knew them all. It was so moving to
And
come back.
to me, as I said, gee, it would have been nice if you were kind of a Sabra Bronxite and you had been here. But the perspective of somebody from the outside, I mean, we talk about these things all the time, and that perspective is incredibly worthwhile. I should mention that I remember years ago with the Columbia School of Journalism, I used to sit in a bus with those students, and they would tour the Bronx, and we would and they would have the same visceral reactions that you had, like, wait a minute, what is this? What was this? And what is it going to become?
Right.
So now you've done the two versions. I don't want to spend any more time on those because I want to get to this one, Numero
The
Trace,
third
South
edition.
Bronx Rising. What years does that cover? And then let's break down what's in there
Okay,
because some
so
of it is just incredibly well documented.
so the second edition ended basically in 2000. So we're now or 2002. So we're now 20 years later. 5 years ago, I get an email from a reader who says, I've read your book. I really love it. But, a lot's going on here, and you should really come back and update this. And I should say that since I wrote what then was called We're Still Here, I've written another 5 books. And I in no way was thinking about coming back and updating this book.
What, that again? Right.
Well, no, it wasn't at all on my mind. But actually, my in-laws were living in the Bronx, and I
Of
was coming up
course.
to see
All
them.
right.
um, and so I thought, well, I will reconnect with the people I know, and then there's a lot of new people. And the story this time was very different because the South Bronx, the Bronx has been rebuilt. The rebuilding has continued. So the story this time is much more about the rise and expansion and creation of new cultural and artistic
Right.
institutions.
Hmm.
And also, I had no idea that the Bronx River for the last 50 years was being slowly restored to the point that,
Hmm.
you now have this beautiful place with parks along it. Someone said to me, "What was the most shocking thing to you when you came back to the Bronx this
And
time?"
was it the Bronx River?
It was the Bronx River because it's so not what you expect. You don't expect to come to the Bronx to find, a beautiful river, the only river
The
in New York
yes,
City.
the river from which we are named, of course.
Yes,
Um, and
yes, for
and
Jonnes Bronx.
the other thing that, or another of the many things, and I must say, congratulations because it's exhaustively researched and indexed and footnoted. I mean that is not often done. A lot of people pass over our borough, but you have really gone to town, so to speak, with this. Um, there are threats, and you have acknowledged those threats of, for example, gentrification in the South Bronx, and you have again talked about all those kinds of things. Let me ask you this, just kind of your impression, and again from somebody from the outside: are you hopeful or hopeless? Because there are people very concerned, for very good reasons, about what's going on down there. That all you got to do is drive down the Deegan, and you see all the new buildings, and those are generally not being built for Bronx people, but for people to, live a little cheaper than, in the Upper East Side. So are you hopeful or hopeless after going through all that about the fourth edition is going to show, not that I'm pushing, the fourth edition is going to show more progress or show how people who were really dedicated got hurt?
I am by nature an optimist, and I think
Okay.
that if you want to put things in context, the Bronx, if it were just a city, would be the seventh largest city in America. And I don't know any other comparable city that lost as much housing and as much population that so totally rebuilt itself. And according to the last census, there are more people living in the Bronx now than were in 2020. So the Bronx is fully recovered. I also think that the changes in the rent laws that happened just before COVID arrived, and I should say I ended up writing a COVID afterwards. So the book
Hmm.
starts, with Jonnes Bronx and comes up through in the end through COVID. Um, I think that the rent laws have removed a lot of the impetus for gentrification and pushing people out. I don't want to get too technical, but there's no
Right.
preferential rents left anymore, and so the incentives for all this sort of predatory private equity and pushing people out, I think have ended. In terms of the sorts of luxury housing that's being built, I mean, it is on what someone has referred to as the Golden Crescent. So it's really along the Harlem River. I I mean, we don't know how that's all
Oh,
going to
okay.
play
I'm
out.
getting that hesitation. You're just
Yeah,
not sure. I'll tell you the thing that inspires me over the last 20 years, and obviously, I mean, Bronx Talk, my other program is 28 years old, so I've been sitting in this seat or that seat for all that time. The human capital
yeah.
here is incredibly fertile, and maybe more so. And the other thing that I would mention, because I know a lot about it, is media in the Bronx. And I tell this story all the time. If you've got 1.4 million people here, the city of Boston has 600,000 people, but they have network television, they have daily newspapers. I think a parallel or an analysis of the development of the Bronx and the state of Bronx media, you know, the infusion of BronxNet television, being able to highlight some things. I think some of that has had real effect in the emergence of News 12 and many other things has had real effect on the development. Plus, the fact that we don't have a lot of media is also one of the problems. So anyway, that's Gary's editorial on you know, and maybe that's for the fourth edition. I don't know. um, so I know you're doing this won't air in time to promote all the events and things that you're doing. How do you find that people of the Bronx respond to this? Are they happy with it? I mean, I see things like I said, "Wow, did she write about the Kingsbridge Armory? Oh, yes, she did. Did she write about Bankside? Oh, yes, she did. Did she, you know, and all these things. I mean, you know, what are people of the Bronx telling you?
Well, many people have actually read the book already because I was sending them advance copies, and it's been out for a couple of weeks now. Um, I have gotten nothing but positive response, and so many people are so involved and committed at so many levels in
That
the
was the
Bronx.
human capital that I was referring to.
Right.
Yes,
And so the person who wrote the forward is Nilka Martell,
right.
and she, I think, at this
She should
point
write a
is
book herself.
yes, yes. And she's I met her through reporting on the restoration of the Bronx River, but she also gave me a fantastic history tour of the very sort
Right.
of colonial
Um,
old Bronx.
Jill, we're almost out of time.
Okay.
I want to congratulate you on the book. I want to urge all my friends and neighbors in the Bronx to pick it up, to read it, because it does two things. One, it's a mirror, and you will recognize all the people and all the things that you have known about and that you have loved and that make you love to be a Bronxite. On the other hand, it will fill in all the blanks of why things happened, how things happened, and you know, the challenging questions like I asked, you know, what's next? Who knows? So congratulations. That's all I want to say, and thank you.
And
You
thank you.
you are welcome here every time because these are the things we need to keep us going, to keep us
Right.
fertile, to
Well,
keep us
I'm hoping to
imagining.
be back for Bronx Week.
All right. Well, we'll look for you then, and we'll bring you back at that time.
Okay.
Jill Jones, the book again, South Bronx Rising. I was just talking with my producer Anderson. We're going to find a place up here for it because many of the books that you refer to in here, like Carolyn McLaughlin's book, are all written about in here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jill.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Great. We'll see you next week. You know, we got to run. We've got a
Okay.
busy
Onward to
show.
the next thing.
Onward. Good night. We'll see you next week.